Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present to you a very good friend of ours. I think this is my 8th official interview with Palmer Luckey, just one of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time. Palmer, as many of you know, went to Long Beach, had a journalism background for a stint. He likes me because I'm in PR. You know, he wants to be in PR, but he's doing something else right now. But he's got a storied entrepreneurial career, one that is not just enviable, but it's humbling. What he's doing with defense and putting all his ingenuity, relationships, capital, it's such an awesome thing. And we're so delighted to have Palmer here. Obviously, he sold Oculus to Facebook back when he was 23. Now that he's aged a little bit, hit the 30 mark, he's running one of the greatest defense companies around. So I'm very excited to have Palmer Luckey take the stage. Palmer.
It was 21, actually.
Oh, was it 21?
Yeah, it was.
Thank you.
I'm all about vanity metrics.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, got a whole bunch of them. Multiple multi-billion-dollar companies before the age of 30, before I got old.
Seriously, I mean, like, Blake, you have a lot of work to do, man. Palmer, tell us a little bit about what you've been up to. Last time we sat down, had an interview, was right before Impact 22. So in the last 12 months, what are some of the rides that you've been on at Anduril?
I'd say the most interesting thing about the last year for Anduril is that not much has changed. We're still doing the same things. The same trends are going on in the world. I talked to a lot of people about this when Russia invaded Ukraine, but I point out that this is not a black swan event that will not reoccur. This is one of many to come, and it really marked the end of a relatively unprecedented period of stability in Western value aligned nations. And what you're seeing play out in Israel is another reflection of that. What you're going to see happening in Taiwan is another reflection of that. I think what you're going to see happen in the Philippines is a reflection of that. And so it's unfortunately, but mostly the world is the same, and we have the same thesis that economic entanglement is not sufficient to deter large-scale violence. It is not sufficient to deter bad actors who are willing to use violence to achieve their aims. And the only way that you can deter them is to have technology that is powerful enough to scare them out of acting in the first place. And when one of them miscalculates, to show everyone else what a mistake they made.
Right. I mean, there's a lot to unpack right there. Wow. I mean, global, affairs and looking at Ukraine and Russia. Why don't we start there? Tell me what you see happening and how this conflict is resolved and how it ends.
It doesn't end for a long time. I was saying this almost a year ago. It's another forever war. There does not appear to be a way, absent some kind of extraordinary political development, that Ukraine can capture and hold the territory that they have lost, nor that Russia can successfully claim all of Ukraine as they want to do. We could see what happened, but I'd say there's at least a few more years of slog there.
Obviously, the last month with the conflict in Israel, give us your comments on that. What is your thoughts and perspective as to how this plays out?
I think that one's going to play out fast.
Okay. Could be interesting.
It's just I'm not good at sports analogies, but you can imagine the sports analogies for the difference between fighting Russia, which until recently was a superpower and is still a nuclear armed power, and fighting Hamas.
Yeah.
Although it's worth noting, Hamas is a bit more powerful than people give them credit for. They get painted as this ragtag group of terrorists, but you have to remember the leaders of Hamas are literally billionaires. These are very wealthy people. They're very connected. They have the support of major nations like Iran, which, while they're denying involvement in this recent attack, has been supplying them with weapons and arms and training for many years. So what people are kind of painting this as a story of some failure of the Israeli security apparatus. The fact that it failed is some indictment of their strategy. It's not the case. They're up against a very a very well-funded, sophisticated adversary that is role-playing as a poor, untrained, ragtag group. And people should be very careful about buying into that idea because that's exactly what they want. I was just at Wall Street Journal D-Live conference, and he said the same thing. Oh, isn't this a reflection of the failure of the Israeli state that a bunch of these people who have almost nothing were able to break through? And I said, you've bought into their whole propaganda. These are not people with almost nothing. Or again, the founders and current leaders of Hamas are literally billionaires who each own individually over a dozen luxury apartments all over the world. This is not the ragtag group that they want us to see them as.
So you see this as a potential play out faster, but what about Iran's role?
Look, now we're getting way into geopolitics. Look, the United States clearly does not want Iran involved. I don't think Iran wants Iran involved.
Right.
We're parking a bunch of carriers over there, not because that's what needs to happen to resolve the current conflict. It is to deter what could happen if Iran were to get directly involved. I could be wrong. I could be eating my words, but I really don't think Iran wants this to turn into a hot war. They are not positioned well to do that.
And so take us a little bit through the last one you mentioned, China and Taiwan. ViewSonic, one of our great partners, headquartered in Taipei. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Taiwan is interesting because they of all of the places that the United States could best arm to defend themselves, Taiwan is the one where I think the economic stakes are the highest. There's clear moral stakes elsewhere, but even if you thought Taiwan was a terrible country, I don't. But if I did, I would still, from a realpolitik perspective, realize that without an independent Taiwan, and I don't mean in the formal sense where they declare that it's actually a two-state system. I mean, the effective independence that Taiwan has as a democracy that can act independent of the Chinese Communist Party. Without that, the United States economy is going to be in a very bad place. If China comes to control the semiconductor fabrication economy of Taiwan, there's a few ways that could go. One is that Taiwan Arson Theory pans out, and the Taiwanese nationalists burn down all of the fabs as the invasion is going on. That puts our economy into the dark ages for at least a few years until we can sufficiently scale up elsewhere, and it's going to be a very painful process, especially because we're not as positioned to survive that as China is, which puts China in, of course, a much better role on the geopolitical stage, especially in countries like Africa, or in continents like Africa.
Right.
Where they're already making a lot of plays. It could be so Taiwan Arson Theory could play out. It could be that China actually takes over the fabs. It could be that China takes over the fabs and is unable to make them work effectively. All of these outcomes are pretty bad, but the worst one is the one where China has control of the world's highest end facilities for making low end powerful semiconductors. Because if they are able to seize control of that, they are going to make it economically infeasible for many other countries to replace that capacity. If the facilities are destroyed, there will be an arms race to try and build the replacement capacity in nations like Korea, nations like Japan. But if China manages to hold on to those facilities, manages to operate them effectively with the people they capture or the people who turn, they are going to make it very hard for Japan or Korea to compete on the economic stage because they're going to be competing against now Chinese managed and owned high-end semiconductors.
Could the U.S. build that sort of semiconductor fabrication?
No, we not really.
Right.
There's this idea in America that you can solve any problem at the last second, and it's born, I think, of our media, our books and our movies and our comic books.
Yeah.
But in real life, you can make decisions that cannot be undone with a quick turn of the mind at the last second and a witty quip. You can cause problems that took decades to cause, that take decades to undo. The United States, in shipping our manufacturing overseas, didn't just ship away our near-term ability to manufacture. We shipped away the job prospects of an entire generation that would have become manufacturing process engineers, that would have become semiconductor fabrication experts. People who are in the United States who are smart enough to do those things do not do those things because there's other ways that are much better to make money. Why would you be a manufacturing process engineer in a country that at a political level and an economic level has shown that it does not value most manufacturing? It's a poor decision. China has made an opposite decision. They've showed that the best way to pull yourself out of poverty is to align with these industries, to align with these technologies. And so when people say, can't we just do the same thing? I really struggle to come up with a positive answer because there are tens of thousands of people missing that we would need to have ready to go if we were going to make a serious play at that. And if you look at situations like U.S. Congress passing the CHIPS Act, $50 billion, and they call it a once in a generation incredible subsidy to the semiconductor industry. The two big problems with that, though: one, $50 billion is a lot of money, but you know what's more money? The $250 billion that Apple, one country, had to pledge to invest in Chinese education and manufacturing just to renew their independent operation deal in China for some unknown number of years. You have one company investing 5 times what the United States is in that type of advanced manufacturing. And the other issue you have is, yes, even if we could build semiconductors, there's a whole value chain that we've also abandoned, turning semiconductors into valuable products. There are no US made computers. There are no US made servers. There are no US made displays outside of 2 displays building things for military applications, like replacements in fighter jets and destroyers. And so what subsidies of semiconductors do is actually allow us to build things like really high-end computer chips that we're actually going to put on a boat that goes to China, and we're going to make $10 on the margin on those chips, and then they're going to sell us back a laptop computer that they make $200 on. So you have to be careful that when trying to build that capacity, you're not actually just subsidizing your strategic adversary. Unfortunately, that's what we're doing right now.
Tell us a little bit about some of the acquisitions that have been publicly available by Anduril. I think a lot of people, think of you as a hardware company, but you're like 90% software. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the vast majority of our work is in software. We started about 7 years ago as an basically our core product is called Lattice. It's an AI engine that powers all of our hardware products. The thinking there was that when you spend $1 billion building a hardware system and the technologies that underpin it, a lot of that value ends up locked up in that specific system. If you can spend $1 billion on a platform technology that can be applied to many hardware systems, you effectively get to multiply the value of that investment over and over and over again. If I can build an AI system that's able to manage the sensors and weapons and integration and communications for one aircraft, and if I'm then able to apply it to 20 more aircraft, that $1 billion I spent building that system, it's like I spent $20 million. Not exactly, but it's certainly, you get a lot more than $1 billion of investment value out of it. So one of the things that we've been doing really effectively is building our own products on top of our Lattice AI, but also buying companies whose own products become vastly more valuable when integrated with the work that we have already done. Some of these companies have been building things like loitering munitions, where they're tube launch drones that are able to kill people. Before, they were treated like remote controlled airplanes, where you had to launch one, have one guy flying it, one guy piloting it. It's his full-time job to do that. You're never going to be able to fly dozens or hundreds or thousands of them in tandem if you are limited to one drone per person. But if you're able to integrate that with Lattice, you now make it a vastly more useful platform. So we're able to buy companies that have things that are useful, but then make them vastly more useful. We recently purchased a company called Blue Force Technologies in North Carolina. They've been building an autonomous aircraft that is called, originally a remotely piloted aircraft called Fury, which they were designing as an adversary air platform, basically an unmanned fighter jet that could be used to dogfight with U.S. aircraft in training applications. What we realized is that if we take out that remote link and we put in an AI brain, we can make this thing into something that can out dogfight anyone's aircraft. And so now we're able to buy that thing, make it much smarter, and make it vastly more valuable than it was before.
So Lattice kind of reminds me of the supercharger network of Tesla because they just keep adding nodes to it. Would you say that's a good metaphor? I mean,
I'd say the only difference there, although maybe this is changing, is that Tesla until recently was keeping that network proprietary to themselves, but now they are opening it up to other people.
Correct.
What people don't understand about Lattice is that despite having a reputation as this Anduril product that powers our systems, our aircraft, our submarines, our ground vehicles, we've actually integrated Lattice with more external companies' hardware than our own hardware. We're integrating with dozens of systems from other companies, hypervelocity gun systems, counter drone systems, naval destroyers, full size fighters, cruise missiles, and so that's something where we get to build it once, and that effort remains, and then all these other systems are able to benefit from it. And so there's a lot of legacy systems that the United States has that are currently not really that useful. If we can apply artificial intelligence to those and turn them into unmanned systems, there's a lot of cool things you can do with them. I'll give you just one really easy, bare bones example without getting into anything that might be in the classified domain. If you have an airplane that doesn't have a person in it, that airplane doesn't have to come back. That means you have the option of flying that airplane twice as far to perform a strike mission as any manned aircraft would ever be sent. And that's something that where you add AI to a plane, you're now able to do that. People say, oh, you can do that remotely piloted. Yes, but you run out of bandwidth really quickly when you have lots of systems. Electronic warfare to jam these airplanes is a really big problem. And the best way to survive an adversary who's competent in electronic warfare and jamming like Russia and China are is to have an airplane that doesn't need a communications link to perform its mission.
What's your prediction on fully autonomous air combat?
It's already happening. It's already happening.
And it's just going to continue to move in that direction until the human's replaced.
I think you have the human in a different role line, right? I think you don't end up with a person in the cockpit, but you have somebody who is now under much less stress with access to much better information, able to make high-level decisions that the robot systems can now execute. One of my favorite things about the new Top Gun movie was how optimistic it was about the attitudes of the Air Force. In the world of Top Gun, you have kind of the bad guy, the bad guy general comes in and he says, "The future's robots, Tom Cruise. And there's not a place in that future for you." And Tom Cruise looks at him and says, "But not today, General." And what's interesting is this idea that you would have a senior DoD official who is all in on robots and is willing to bet on it being the future. That's actually currently not the case. There's a lot of people who don't believe that AI is going to get there. They think that having a human in the seat is the only way that you're going to be able to do these things, at least within their lifetimes. And so really it's just a bet.
Yeah.
Are they right or am I right?
Right.
And I think I'm going to end up being right. And if I'm wrong, then my company's not going to do very well.
So as we round up this interview, and I'm going to let the audience ask a couple questions to Palmer. Tell us a little bit about, like, there are so many people that try to get in the defense sector but fail. I mean, they just can't get lift. How did you bypass that challenge?
By already selling my first look, it's true. The United States used to be very good at turning small companies into large companies if you had defense products that work. This was a muscle we had for hundreds of years. But since the end of the Cold War, we've fallen to consolidation, where you have 5 companies getting about 80% of the spending. You have 30% of major weapons programs have a single bidder, meaning there's no competition at all. And in the last 35 years, there were pre-Anduril only 2 examples of a defense company to achieve a valuation of $1 billion. It's Palantir and SpaceX, both also founded by billionaires. It's really just a testament to the fact that in America, anything is possible if you're a billionaire already. It's a really tough business. It's a really tough business to get into. If you try to raise money as a defense startup, you would have smart investors say, "I love your tech, I love your patriotism," but 35 years, there's only 2 examples. They're both founded by billionaires. And if you're not in that same boat, why would I bet that you're going to be the first company the first company in modern history to break that cycle and to prove that the United States can do what we did with Sam Colt or John Browning,
Right?
and turn a small arms company into a large one. And they'd say, I can't make that bet. I'm out. So
Right.
that was also one of the reasons I wanted to get into defense, into national security. I felt like I did have the resources, the network, the reputation, and I was able to show up to investors and say, look at this a different way.
Yeah.
Look at this outside of the box. It's not that everyone fails in defense unless they're a billionaire. It's that every billionaire who gets into defense is successful. And that's what it took.
I wondered when you were talking to those investors if they had their shirts on. I don't know why. I can't get this out of my head, Blake. That was really unnecessary.
I've been lucky. It was very hard to raise money for my first company, Oculus, because there had never been a successful VR company in history. And the thing that Blake and I have in common is Peter really helped us out at an early age. So Peter Thiel and his founders fund was the first institutional investor in Oculus. When everyone was telling us no, they gave us a check for $1 million, and then everyone wanted to give us money. Anduril was hard, but for totally different reasons. Everyone agreed that it was going to be a big deal, and everyone agreed that it was going to succeed, but people were afraid to be associated with it. We had people who I made hundreds of millions of dollars say that they couldn't be associated with us because they're like some combination of weapons are inherently immoral, or you and me know that they're not, but everyone else don't. And you know, in 2019, Bloomberg named us the most controversial company in the tech industry. I won the Wired magazine Worst Person of the Year award, and people were serious in good faith, not satirically, making the argument that the that conflict was over. There would never be another major war. That economic entanglement with all of these different nations, including Russia through their sale of energy, oil and gas, China through their sale of modern electronics goods, that this just made the idea of conflict really impossible, and that anybody who was acting like it was possible was a warmonger who wanted it to happen, or saber rattling to try and get some taxpayer dollars. And that was a real problem. These people were seriously arguing Anduril is you know, what they're making is irrelevant, and they're just trying to fearmonger and saying that the world is a dangerous place. And that's why I've been called in the last few years the Palmer Luckey "I told you so" tour.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for the stuff. This is an AI conference, right? So it's been amazing content all day.
And I'll have to point
Yes.
out too,
Yes.
when I started Anduril, people, you know, AI was not nearly as cool 7 years ago. There were people who thought it was cool, but it's been interesting to have that develop where, you know, when we were working on it, people just didn't get it. They really did not believe in what was possible. Now everybody gets it, which is nice, including our customers. I love ChatGPT. Not because I use it, but because my customers all use it, and that has made them believe in AI, even though my AI has nothing to do with large language models.
So tapping into your genius, can you tell us your predictions on some markets where you see AI growth, investments, areas that we should pay attention to outside of defense?
Oh man. I mean, all the email jobs are going away. That's for sure. So if your job can be done over a computer terminal, then you are in big trouble. The people who are going to be in a really good position are the ones who I hesitate to say face to face, because there's so many trades that don't require social interaction as kind of the foundation of the work. But like the people who are doing large scale manufacturing of hardened steel for ship hulls, they are not going to be disrupted by AI the way that people who do email jobs are. I don't think that you're going to see restaurant servers disrupted in much the same way. Obviously, fast food is going to be a different game, but so I think that's one area. All of the email jobs, all of the remote jobs. Like I've been telling kids that for this reason alone, you should not want to work a remote job. Any job you can do remotely, that means it can be done with a very limited set of input and output. And it happens that those sets of inputs and outputs are exactly the ones that computers are the best at doing. So I would not want to be doing a remote job right now if I were trying to.
And speaking of remote
trying
jobs,
to build a career.
we did a tour at Anduril recently, and you had mentioned how many billion-dollar companies do you know where the workforce works remotely? Tell us a little bit about that with company culture.
I mean, there's a handful. Like I think Databricks was built fully remotely, but there's so few. There's a handful of companies that have been built fully remotely that are worth anything, and there's countless incredibly valued companies that have been built in person. And there's a lot of ways to look at this, but I look at it in two ways. First, you have to actually understand that people's jobs is not necessarily what has explicitly been in their job description. If a programmer says that they can write more lines of code from home, I will talk to them and say, your job is not just to write lines of code. It's also to give input to people who are completely outside of the realm of code, to talk with hardware people, to talk with manufacturing people, help them understand your problems, and you help them understand their problems. It's also to mentor a new generation that is coming up so they can follow in your footsteps. You can write as many lines of code as you want sitting at home, but your job is not just to write those lines of code. It's the other incidental things. And if you go take this to the extreme, I could end up with a company where I need to have tight integration of manufacturing, hardware design, electrical design, software engineering, and I need to have those people working together. Imagine if I let those people work from home. What you end up with is 1,000 ivory towers with 1,000 software engineers telling a bunch of people that are actually on the line in the factory how they're going to do their jobs, and none of them have ever seen it or have any understanding of the reality of it. Maybe it could be done, but I'm not going to bet that. It's hard enough to build a successful business without doing something new. And the last thing I'll say, and this is the real conspiracy theory here, the real reason that remote work took off is because of the incentives of publicly traded corporations to pretend that it was not a destructive force. remember that publicly traded companies have spent many billions of dollars over the years trying to optimize the efficiency of their workforce, trying to optimize the efficiency of their productivity. And a lot of people have spent a lot of money trying to figure out the optimal system. How likely is it that after decades and billions of dollars of spending on those optimizations, that it turns out the one form of work that is possible under a rapidly implemented government pandemic mandate, which is that everybody works from home and nobody's allowed in the office? What are the odds that that is actually the most productive way all along and nobody ever saw it? The reason that people ever bought into this was because publicly traded companies were asked on their quarterlies, how is the pandemic going to affect your timelines, your revenue, your margins, your new product development? And what did they have to say? They had to say through gritted teeth, oh yeah, it's great. It might even be better than it was before, in fact. And because they all said that together, any company that stood up and said, yeah, this is actually really bad. This is making it much harder for us to develop new talent. It's making it much harder for us to develop new products. We are falling behind. We are struggling to manage the productivity of our workforce. We have people who are gaming the system. If a company stood up and said that as everyone else lies through their teeth, they would be uniquely punished in the markets. People would say, wow, this company just isn't adapting with the times. They haven't adapted to the modern reality of the modern workforce. This is the new office life. It's your living room. And so everyone just had to lie together is my intuition. But now people, and this is also why people, they can't admit this. They have to say, well, now we're taking a different approach, a blended approach of 1, now 2, now 3, now 4 days a week in the office. Even the people building the metaverse are forcing their employees to come back to the office full time or face immediate termination after 6 months of grace period. So yeah, I think work from home is mostly a scam.
I'm going to ask one more question, then open it up to our audience to ask maybe 3 or 4 questions, and then we're going to head over to Craig Action's house next door, or 2 houses to the right. Palmer, look, on a serious note, my family and I just came back from Japan. I was at Craig's house the other day. I came out and I saw this pink car in front of your house. Tell us about your pink car.
Oh man, do we really have to talk? It's a sore spot. I've been working on that project for a really long time, or paying other people to work on it mostly. But it's a Mazda Speed AutoZam AZ1. It's a small K car in Japan that stock has about 64 horsepower, weighs 1,600 pounds. It's now a little over 1,800 pounds, and it has depending on how you drive the motor, somewhere between 5 and 10 times as much power. It's a lot faster. We put a roll cage in it.
Did you take that on the freeway?
Oh yeah. No, I drove it up to Anime Expo over July 4th weekend. So that was a lot of fun. It's a very small car. You gotta make sure you don't get stuck behind one of the new Ford F-150s, or they won't see you over their hood.
Oh, awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, why don't a few of you that just have a question on your mind, if you don't mind, just like raising your hand, I'll call on you. Say your name really loud and what your question is. Is that Josh? I can't see you.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, go for it.
All right, so 3 years ago, you came and spoke at one of my events, and I asked you a question that I immediately regretted after the second it came out of my mouth. And I asked you, what do you think Ready Player One will actually become a reality, knowing that you built Oculus, right? So don't answer that now. That's okay. The question I have.
The answer is no.
Okay, I remember your answer was like, no, it's totally dystopian. That's dumb, right?
Stories need conflict.
Yeah. So the question that I probably will immediately regret after I ask it is, I don't normally trust anything the government says is a reality, so they're releasing.
That's a great rule.
Great. They're releasing a bunch of things about UFOs, and I think that's a very interesting landscape. You have access to information that most people don't because of the industry and who you are in that industry. School us for a second, like what's up with all the things we're seeing flying around and what have you?
I'm unfortunately, I'm not in a position where I can talk about it one way or the other.
Wow.
Neither confirm or deny. Next question, right here, sir. Say your name, where you work, and what your question is.
My name is Patrick, and I do believe that AI is going to be completely agree. That's powered through chips, correct? So, as an investor in common stocks, would you say Nvidia or AMD, which company is supplying the most chips that will enable that process?
Well, I mean, Nvidia is the clear leader right now, and it's pretty incredible to watch their market cap. There was it's publicly known at this point, but there was a point where Oculus, after we were acquired by Facebook, we actually almost bought Nvidia back when they were worth single-digit billions. And of course, now when they're approaching $1 trillion in market cap. But I think it's a good thing we didn't get them, because our focus was entirely on what they could do to build standalone virtual reality rendering hardware to go into virtual reality headsets that didn't require a connection to a computer that you could wear. Had we owned them, we never would have given them the freedom to pursue doing what they've done in crypto mining, and to now apply a lot of that same technology into AI. They've had a really incredible path. They've had a lot of luck, but a lot of skill to make that luck possible. Man, public markets. I'll be honest, I'm an index fund guy. I don't try to beat the markets except in cases where the media is obviously distorting things in a really huge way. I invested a lot in SeaWorld when a bunch of people got angry after the Blackfish documentary and their stock went down by like 90%. I was like, well, their business fundamentals are still pretty good. People still like whales a lot. And so like that was one of the like 3 times in my whole life that I've made a wild bet. I did also buy a lot of Meta stock the day that they announced that they were refocusing the company entirely on virtual reality and the metaverse. So that was one of the other few bets. In terms of trying to beat the market, I would say Nvidia is a really solid. They're definitely the leader now, and I think they're going to remain the leader. The thing you got to remember about Nvidia is it's not so much their technology that is going to give them a moat. It is their developer ecosystem and all the developer tools that they've built that allow you to build things for NVIDIA hardware. Even if they were to throw out all of the actual GPUs and GPU technology they're doing, and imagine that they were to move to some new architecture that some new startups are working on, like optical, like some of these optical computing architectures, they are going to be in a place where they can immediately make it backwards compatible with everything that's been developed with NVIDIA toolkits and SDKs in mind. I mean, just one example, everything that my company builds is on top of NVIDIA. I made that bet years ago, and I know they're going to continue to be around. I know they'll continue to maybe not always be the best. There might be brief periods where someone leaps in front of them, and then they're going to stomp on those guys and take 3 steps over them. Like that, they will never be behind for long. And if they were to totally change their technology, all of that would be immediately back portable into every drone that I make, every sensor that I make. That's their real advantage. Every car they power is going to be in the same position. Every weapon they power, every restaurant they power, all of this AI stuff that's built on top of NVIDIA hardware is going to be in a similar position. So I think you can't go wrong betting on NVIDIA.
And as you guys know, Keith Stryer, who heads up worldwide AI for NVIDIA, will be speaking at our Venture Capital Summit. Final question for Palmer. By the way, do you see that? I know how much Palmer likes Star Wars, so I'm like, I want the world's biggest lightsaber to be between Palmer and Craig's house, and look at that. Okay, last question. Go for it, Mr. Latona.
David Latona, first of all, thank you so much for having us, and what you have accomplished is absolutely amazing, and it's very inspiring. I'm going to ask this question in a bit of a joking manner, but with the unmanned drones and everything else we've been talking about, the single-way missions and everything, Mr. Stark, when you can actually build the Iron Man suit?
The biggest problem with the idea of the Iron Man suit is that it's an idea whose time has come but then passed. A lot of the technology was actually viable quite some time ago to build manned exoskeletons that would allow you to carry more armor and carry more weapons. But we've got to the point now where having a person inside of the robot actually presents more challenges than operating that robot remotely. Exactly. Like it's actually there's going to be a limited subset of missions for which humanoid robots are the right choice. Humans are not actually a very good killing machine shape. And there's way better killing machines. And so Terminator is not going to look like Terminator. And actually, this goes way back. I mean, Walt Disney was working on a project with the Department of Defense called the Amplified Man, the Man Amplifier. And the idea was to measure his motions and then use servo motors to amplify the movement at greater power. They were working originally on it for loading missiles and bombs onto underwing mounts in bombers and jets, and with eventually wanting to have combat applications. This was based off of Walt Disney's animatronics technology that they use in so many of their rides. Well, Walt Disney was actually very patriotic guy, very pro-military. You may not know this, but Walt Disney company has actually made more hours of footage during World War II for training videos and for propaganda videos than the full total sum of their output since. And they were extraordinarily active and made many hundreds of hours of animated training films and propaganda films in support of the United States and our allies. Anyway, getting back to the Iron Man suit, this is the biggest problem: is anything you build on the Iron Man suit side is going to be a stunt rather than actually the right thing to do. Because if you could build a suit that is able to that greatly amplify the powers of a man, you should just take the man out of it and have that suit go in on its own, which of course was the plot of some of the Iron Man movies, and this was the position of the United States military in those movies. Actually, quite a realistic outcome. And what I have to remind people is that in those movies, the government was actually right that time. The reason Tony wants to be in the suits is because he has a huge ego. Like that's actually all it boils down to. He wants to be the Iron Man. And I also want to be the Iron Man, but unfortunately, I don't think it's in the cards for me.
Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Palmer Luckey. You're a wonderful friend to us, Palmer. Thanks for all that you do.